Driveway kept getting smaller every month. It looked like the line was moving. I brought out my old house plans and measured. 3 feet were missing. That night, I set up a hidden camera. The footage showed something unbelievable. I took it straight to the authorities the next day. Someone's car was towed, and they stood in shock. I've lived in my house in New Jersey for over 20 years. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine. When I bought it, I made sure to get everything in writing, property lines, easements, legal stuff. I didn't want to worry about it later. The driveway was mine, the fence was my neighbor's, and the space between was a clear boundary. Simple, no problems. Until one day, I pulled into my driveway and felt something was wrong. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining things. My driveway felt narrower. I wasn't sure why, but I had to park closer to my garage door than usual. It wasn't a big deal, maybe I just parked weird that day. I let it go. Then it happened again and again. A few months passed, and every time I came home, it felt worse. I started second-guessing myself. Was I losing my mind? Had my driveway always been this tight? I asked my wife if she noticed anything. She looked at me like I was crazy. "You're just bad at parking," she said. Maybe she was right. I let it go until one morning when I was pulling out, and my tire hit something, a hard edge that was new. I got out and looked. There was a fresh strip of pavement along the edge of my driveway, blending into mine like it had always been there. But it hadn't. I knew it hadn't. I squatted down, running my hand over it. The asphalt was smoother than the rest of my driveway. It was fresh. I glanced over at my neighbor's driveway. That looked new too. It clicked. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but my neighbor had stolen part of my driveway. I didn't say anything yet. I wanted proof. I went inside, dug through my old papers, and pulled out the house plans from when I bought the place. My property line was clearly marked. My driveway hadn't moved, something else had. I grabbed a tape measure, walked outside, and measured. 3 feet. 3 full feet were gone. I stood there, tape measure in hand, staring at my own driveway like an idiot. My neighbor had stolen 3 feet of my property, and I hadn't even noticed until now. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, going over every possibility. Had I made a mistake? Was there some kind of property shift I didn't know about? Had I signed something and forgotten? No, that wasn't possible. I needed proof. The next day, I went out and bought a small security camera, nothing fancy, just something I could stick inside my garage window facing the driveway. If anything happened, I'd have it on video. And then I waited. A week passed, nothing happened. I started to wonder if I'd been wrong. Maybe I really was just bad at parking. Then one night, I checked the footage, and I saw something that made my blood boil. At 2 a.m., my neighbor walked into my driveway. He looked around, making sure no one was watching, then a truck pulled up. A crew of guys got out, and right there in the dead of night, they started working on his driveway. But they weren't fixing it, they were expanding it onto mine. I watched in stunned silence as they ripped up the old boundary line, poured new asphalt 3 feet over onto my property, and painted fresh white lines like it had always been that way. They even sprayed a new border on my driveway, like they owned it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Who does that? Who just takes land like that? I was furious, but I kept my cool. I needed to handle this the right way. If I confronted him, he'd deny it. If I waited too long, he'd act like it had always been his. I copied the footage onto a flash drive and went straight to the city's property department. When I got there, I explained what happened. The guy at the counter gave me a look, the kind people give when they think you're exaggerating. Then I pulled out the house plans, then I showed him the footage. He watched in silence, then he picked up the phone. Within hours, a city inspector was at my house. He measured everything, compared it to the official records, checked the footage, took a ton of pictures, and then he made some calls. By the afternoon, I had official confirmation. My neighbor was in serious violation of city codes. And the best part? His car was parked on my stolen property. The inspector made a call. 30 minutes later, a tow truck pulled up. I was outside when my neighbor ran out, still in his slippers, watching his car get hooked up. His face was priceless. "What the hell are you doing?" he shouted at me. I crossed my arms. "Taking my driveway back," I said. He looked around, saw the city inspector, saw the officials, his face went pale. "You can't just tell my car," he yelled. "It's on my property," I said. He opened his mouth to argue, but the inspector cut him off. "You move the property line, that's illegal. You need to remove everything you built onto his land immediately." My neighbor stammered, trying to argue, saying I didn't understand how property lines worked, that I must have been confused. Then I pulled out my house plans and the footage. He shut up real fast. My neighbor's face twisted in anger, but there was something else too, panic. He knew he was caught. The inspector wasn't budging, and the tow truck guy didn't care about his excuses. His car was already on the hook, tires barely touching the pavement. "You'll have to pay the fine," the inspector told him. "And you need to remove that section of your driveway immediately." My neighbor clenched his jaw. I could almost hear his teeth grinding. "Fine," he snapped. "I'll fix it." I could tell he didn't mean it. His voice was too quick, too eager to just get everyone off his back. He was stalling. He had no intention of fixing anything. The tow truck driver finished hooking up the car and pulled away. My neighbor stood there, arms stiff at his sides, watching his car disappear down the road. I thought maybe, just maybe, this was the end of it, that he'd realize he couldn't just steal land and get away with it, that he'd fix his mistake and move on. I was wrong. That night, I heard something outside. At first, I thought it was the wind, maybe a stray cat knocking over the garbage cans. Then I heard scraping, not normal scraping, deliberate scraping. I grabbed my phone and peered through the blinds. There he was, in the middle of the night. My neighbor was out there with a crowbar, chipping away at the fresh pavement like some kind of lunatic. He was working fast, throwing chunks of asphalt into a garbage bag, trying to erase the evidence. I hit the record button on my phone. Seriously? I called out through the window. He froze, slowly turning his head toward me. The way he stared, eyes dark, mouth slightly open, it wasn't embarrassment, it wasn't even anger. It was something else, like he was calculating. He didn't say a word, he just dropped the crowbar and walked back inside his house. I stayed up for hours, waiting to see if he'd come back out. He didn't. The next morning, I checked the driveway. The part he had chiseled away was uneven, rough, like an animal had been clawing at it. But here's the thing, he didn't remove it all, just enough to make it look messy, to make it seem like the boundary was unclear again. I had a bad feeling, and I was right. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail, a legal notice. My neighbor was suing me. I had to read it 3 times before it made sense. He was claiming that I had encroached on his property, that my driveway was on his land. But he had proof. I laughed, I growled, but then I got mad. This wasn't some empty threat, he had actually filed paperwork. He was serious, he was trying to flip the situation on me. I went straight to my lawyer. We had the house plans, the footage, the city's ruling, everything. My lawyer wasn't worried, legally. You can click on share and more to see if there is a part 2.